What's good, guys? It's Obli here, and today I want to bring you why you should play Frost DK in Season 3. So there's a lot of similarities with Frost DK and Unholy, but there's slightly different things that we will go over. So things like the damage. So the much like Unholy, where you have a very simple rotation, unlike Unholy, it's very upfront damage. You don't have to track a lot buff-wise. You don't really have to track many buffs at all. Basically, everything tracks itself if you're just playing the game properly. If you're just playing your rotation normally, you don't actually have to have a look at many things, mainly just your burst buttons. Yeah, very good single target damage without having to sacrifice your AoE. It's not the best single target, but it is still good, and you don't have to sacrifice AoE. Like I just said, it's actually a lifesaver when it comes to Mythic Plus. Now, Deathbringer used to be super good at this, now not so much. Now going from Deathbringer, Rider seems to be the winner, but both of them are really close at the moment, and that is another bonus to playing Frost DK. You could play either Deathbringer or Rider. Rider being slightly harder, Deathbringer being slightly easier, but both of these classes requiring some heavy uptime to be effective. One of the bad things about Rider is the fact that you have to put a talent node into Frost and Fury, which isn't the best, but the actual damage from Rider is really nice, and you have passive damage from pets, from AI, which you can now control with pet attack macros, which I think is very neat. Not to mention, with both of those hero talents, you are literally playing with 5 buttons, and it's only 3 at a time at any given scenario. So if it's 3 targets or more, you're looking at Frost Scythe, Howling Blast, Glacial. If it's single target, you're looking at Frost Strike, Howling Blast, Obliterate, and it's always that. You have your special abilities like Empowering Weapon, maybe Reaper's Mark if you don't have it macroed, Breath, but those things they're very infrequently casted. Is that a word? Is that good grammar? I don't know, but you have your normal rotation anyway that is quite simple and easy to pick up, and because there's not a lot of buffs to track, only basically Bone Grind is probably your best one, or most important one. Other than that, it makes it really simple, really easy to be just a pick up and go class. So in terms of the damage, it's very good damage. Its AoE is very decent as well. There's only one thing that really reduces damage the more AoE you do. So Frost Scythe, for example, deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets, but will still continue to do a good amount of damage to everything if you have 20 targets or more. Glacial Advance doesn't even suffer that. Glacial Advance does less, a lot less, but it doesn't suffer that target cap, which I think is good. Like Reaper's Mark, for example, when it explodes, it really does a ton of damage, and it doesn't do... where is it? It's... when Reaper's Mark explodes, it deals 20% of the damage dealt to nearby enemies. That's uncapped as well. So the AoE from Frost just goes up and up and up. It's just like Unholy pretty much benefits the same thing with most of their abilities, like Epidemic, but things like Bursting Swords, it's 8, Mage's Cleave, it's 8, D&D Cleave, it's 8. Frost doesn't have to worry about things like that. Another plus is if you wanted to switch from Frost to Unholy, if you wanted to switch from Unholy to Frost, the stats are basically the same in Rider, which is great. It's really easy to do. So the damage we know is great. We don't need to talk about that. I think we've seen a lot of that in the PTR and how the damage is decent. It's not the best DPS class in the game. There are other classes that are doing way more damage than Frost is. It's just easy to do that damage once you pick it up. Now, in terms of the CC and utility that DK provides, you've got things like you obviously have an interrupt, then you have Blinding Sleet, Asphyxiate, and Grip twice to disrupt a mob at least 4 times before you need to actually interrupt it, which is good. You then have an uncapped AMZ, which will be decent in the raid. Not so much in Mythic Plus, but it will still be very good in the raid. You have AMS to completely just nullify a spell as a whole. Say goodbye to any boss mechanic that you don't want to deal with. Then if it's physical and it stuns you or fears you or something like that, just IBF. Or just Lichborn. And talking about IBF and Lichborn, they're very strong defensives. You have 30% DR, 15% DR. You have a baked-in DR to your Raised Dead in the form of Enfeeble, 12%. That is pretty fucking good. That's like having Lichborn on there as much as your ghoul is basically out. I think that's unreal. Then you have your fast horse if you're playing the Rider. So one of the downsides of DK is that you are a very slow spec when you don't have Death Advance or your Death Charge, but when you do, it's not too bad because you can spec into something like March of Darkness, where you gain additional 25% movement speed over the first 3 seconds. And you do, well, right now I'm inaccurate, so it doesn't even matter, but you fucking zoom, you do zoom. This is a bad example. I should know better. Not to mention, with Death Advance, the knockback prevention is crazy good. Think of fights like Razageth, Nurabar Palace, Sprocketmonger, all of those things really benefit from Death Advance, just like in the Unholy video. It's exactly the same thing. Playing Frost DK will see you being very lazy in raid, but in a good way, because then you can focus on doing damage. And even if you do focus on doing damage and doing your mechanics and you still get hit by something, you are very tanky and you will survive, which is good. I think I was hit by a web blade in my progression and still managed to survive and just quickly death strike myself back to full HP. So speaking about that, our self-healing is very good. Death Strike in itself as an ability is amazing, especially if you get hit really hard one time and then Death Strike, you can basically heal yourself of half that damage straight away. It's pretty good. Then in terms of PvP, you're pretty decent at PvP as FrostDK. I mean, you were more decent a few patches ago, but things like the Chains of Ice perma slow that you can keep on something, the fact that you can't be slowed below 70%, that's pretty nuts. You can Delirium is pretty OP when it comes to PvP, reducing the cooldown recovery rate of movement enhancing abilities by 50% for 12 seconds. That is basically on the target all the time. And that's a lot more impactful than you might think. Then you have like Dark Simulacrum, where you can steal somebody else's spell and change the tide of the game if it's an important spell. So, in terms of utility, I think we don't bring tons, but we bring enough to do something special if it's just us. The problem with the way that utility and things are looked at now is that it's an overarching theme where do you bring a raid fight changing mechanic or raid fight changing ability that you can completely negate, or you can make a hell of a lot easier? And no, really we can't. I mean, anything we can grip you can also push. So now we'll move on to the downsides of playing with Frost. We have no raid buff. We have only really grip and AMZ, which is just not enough to really warrant much of a spot in the raid. I mean, doing good damage is... If we were doing so much damage that we made up for things like this, then we would be the raid buff, and therefore it would be alright. But sadly, we just don't at this point. It's not ideal that we bring basically nothing. The way that DK plays is very selfish, in my opinion. We have a lot of things that can save ourselves, like anti-magic shell and IBF, but we don't have anything that we can do to really save other people. You can go into the talent where you can give other players anti-magic shells as well, but it won't do the same thing that it does for us, where it can prevent debuff applications and stuff like that, and it's a much worse version too, so it's almost not really worth picking at all. Now, to talk about the actual rotation and the downsides of the rotation, if RNG is not on your side, it is a very slow spec. You do need to have that crit to make up for it. Rider, you really like haste, but because you really like haste, you kind of have to take that from somewhere, and it might be crit. Because of that, Killer Machine procs are a lot less infrequent, or they're more infrequent. I'm not sure the grammar is there, but you can see yourself not really playing to your optimal standard if you're not geared correctly, which means that you could be sitting there doing nothing for a very long time. Now, we do have a power room weapon, and it has been changed. Now it will give you Killer Machine procs. You need a target to cast it. But if you don't have any charges of these, you've been a bit more aggressive with it, trying to fetch some DPS with it instead of trying to be conservative, and you might end up being in a position where you have to just sit there and wait. That's not too fun. That's something that Unholy doesn't really have to worry too much about. Then you have the other spec, or I guess tree you can go down, which is the Frostbane tree. And Frostbane tree is super cool. It's a cool ability, but it just does everything that Breath can do, but worse. So there's basically no point picking it. Breath even gives you resources to increase and help your gameplay, help the flow of gameplay. Whereas Specking Frostbane doesn't really do that, because it actually procs off of something that spends runic power while being a runic power spender. That's a bit weird. Then, if you stick with the Breath build and you try to go Rider of the Apocalypse, the pet AI could be a little bit pants. You could spawn terrible riders all fight. Now, our 2-set will offset that. We'll always spawn probably the best one for us as Frost. But with a simple pet macro, you can fix the pet AI, just having it attack what you're attacking. So I'd macro that to bloody everything. But again, pet AI isn't always the best thing. So the spec is quite fast during burst, but it's quite slow outside of burst as well. Because in your burst windows, you do get an injection of resources, which does help the flow. But again, you have to pick things like Frostworm's Fury, which is a shit talent, in order to actually play Rider, which is our better talent at the moment. But the last thing is it requires so much heavy uptime as well in order to be effective. You just don't have anything from range. If you try to attack mobs at range with your Howling Blast, it does like 40k damage. There you can see at the tooltip there, like 40k damage. Has nothing compared to like Empowering Weapon. This is probably like your best ranged ability, but you need to keep it for generating Killer Machine procs and things like that. So yeah, I mean, one of the downsides as well is this you're a terrible PI target at the moment. I mean, I think when we play Rider, we have more of a raid group and you have more haste. The PI target would actually be pretty decent, but we've kind of lost that. We used to be quite a decent PI target in AoE. I don't think it's quite as decent anymore.